Welcome everyone to today's Wetland Link International webinar. For those who may not know me, I'm Tina Redshaw. I'm the head of Wetland Link International, as well as being WWT's International Engagement Manager. I'm hugely excited today to welcome our three guests who come from a place that lies not far from the shores of the United Kingdom, but is not part of the United Kingdom. The Isle of Man is a self-governing British Crown dependency, which means that it has its own parliament, its own government, and its own laws, except it does allow the United Kingdom to have responsibility for its international relations under international law. But that is the only bit of governance that the United Kingdom has any responsibility for in relation to the Isle of Man. As an island in the Irish Sea between the west coast of northern England and the east coast of Northern Ireland, it also has a fascinating geography and biodiversity that we're going to hear all about from our three guests today. So I'd very much like to welcome our guests. We will be hearing from Kathleen Graham, who's the General Manager of a very long-standing Wetland Link International member, the Curraghs Wildlife Park on the Isle of Man. We're going to hear next from Allison Leonard, who is the Managing Director of Manx Birdlife. She's been a conservationist for over 20 years and has been with Manx Birdlife for the past 3 years. And finally, we'll hear from David Bellamy, who is Head of Conservation and Land at Manx Wildlife Trust, where he's also worked as an agro-environment officer and as a consultant avian ecologist.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Really excited to be here today. So I'm from the Curraghs Wildlife Park. We're a zoo, we're a member of Bealers and we're the only wildlife park on the Isle of Man. David is from Manx Wildlife Trust, which is the largest wildlife charity on the Isle of Man. And then we've got Allison as well from Manx Birdlife, which would be the second biggest animal charity. Next slide, please. So here we are. So the Curraghs Wildlife Park, it's sat on about 40 acres. It's more commercial, I would say, in regards to the Manx Wildlife Trust or Manx Birdlife, in the fact that we do operate leisure attraction. It's mostly used by our locals. Our local population is 85,000, but we do attract visitors as well. Next slide, please. And so Tina's already explained where we are. I was going to explain, even people in the UK sometimes aren't too sure where the Isle of Man is. They think we're the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England. Unfortunately, we're a bit windier and wetter than the Isle of Wight. They're right in the heart of the British Isles. If you were to take a tractor to draw it round the British Isles, the pin would be in the Isle of Man. And yes, we have our own parliament, so it is independent. So in 2016, the island earned UNESCO biosphere status, mostly because of how the local population live and work and take care of the environment. People here are very engaged with the environment and protecting it. So that was quite an honour. And we have the Manx flag there as well up in the corner. It is a language called Manx Gaelic. It's not spoken too much now. It is a resurrected language. Everybody is really first language is English, but there is some speakers. And the three legs of man flag, it's often paired with a Latin statement, which means wherever you shall throw it, it shall land. And what it means is about the resilience and resourcefulness of the people of the Isle of Man. Next slide. So the Wetlands for Life, if you're, some of you may be aware, you may already be working with EASA zoos, but it's a focus for the next 2 years until 2027. many EASA zoos are taking part in the Wetlands campaign. I don't need to tell you how important wetlands are for fauna and flora. You know all that information. What we're doing as EASA zoos, we're raising awareness with the general public about wetlands and their protection. And we're also fundraising for projects as well. So if you're not involved with an EASA zoo, it might be a really good collaborative time, a time if you're in touch about ordinance to seek out your nearest EASA zoo and have a word with the director there. Next slide, thanks. So here we are. Here's the Curraghs Wildlife Park. The wider area, green area there is the Bellamy Curragh. Now, Curragh is just a word for Manx word for willow woodland, willow bog, and the dark area is within the Ramsar. So we have part of the park that's in the Ramsar site. Where our animals are is not in the Ramsar site. The nature trail goes through the Ramsar site. The rest of the Bellamy Curraghs is looked after by Manx Wildlife Trust, Manx National Heritage, and a few private landowners. Next slide. So we have a combination of, we have our species which are breeding programs, but they mix quite well with some of the local wildlife. There's a stop in the corner of the aerial shot. And what you can see there is you can see the island that our gibbons have. So we use the islands and to create environments which don't have barriers. So it's a very natural wildlife park. And many of the wild animals will use the area as well. Yes, it's just above the Gibbon Island, and on another island further we have spider monkeys and our flamingos nest there. There's a cormorant there the other day. We have lots of moorhens. So there's a lot of natural wildlife as well. Next slide, please. We have things like fishing cat. We've got white and gentle lemur. They're one species of primate, and we have our Humboldt penguins. So there's a lot of wetland species. We not entirely wetland species. We do have one or two things like meerkats. But that's the park element of it. But what I'm going to talk to you about is our nature trail, how we use a Ramsar site to really engage people in wetlands and wildlife. Next slide, please. So recently we reinterpreted this. I say we, it was actually my education manager, Liz Brunswick, who put in all the hard work. I'm very glad to have some fabulous staff at the park. And we can see there's a Manx Gaelic, the Manx Gaelic there is well for the nature trail. And next slide, please. So it's quite interactive. We made sure it had different levels. So it has levels for engaging children. It has higher level signs. It has a lot of examples of what you can do. It has mindful prompts. It has historical geography of the area. And we are trying to encourage behaviour change as well, because that's quite an important thing that we do, is actually getting people to change behaviours, not just learn about the wetlands. Next slide, please. So this is our higher level slides. We've got a sign there. It shows one of our corporate groups. So we have a few financial services that operate on the Isle of Man, and we'll use them in Make a Difference days. So what they're doing in one of the signs there, you can see a group of people, they're clearing some of the willow so that we could make sure that the heath-spotted orchid has room to grow there. It also explains about the Manx Wildlife Trust sites where you can see further wetlands. We have a sign about the history of the area. So you can see there used to be potting there. And there's a picture of it, but it's nearly 200 years ago when it was just a lake. So it's increasingly, the willow has grown up over the years. And then there's a sign there showing all the different flora you might see on the wetland trail. Next slide. So it's a very green whatever time of year, there's always something to be seen out there. And we have little bite-sized bits of information. Next slide, please. So we try to engage children. It's small signs, just bits of information. There's a bug house there, so giving an example of what people can do. Slightly witty health and safety sign there, asking people not to go off the boardwalk. And of course, we educate about wetlands. It's really interactive for the kids. We've got some sound posts, and the picture you can see there, those kids listening to that sign are actually the kids who did the recordings, and they're the children of who's radio operator. And they recorded snippets of information, and it's really inclusive as well. It's quite good if you've got people who just repair, who provide things for them that's just readable, is actually tactile. So we've got a turnaround there, teaching about butterflies. And then we have a trail, a brass rubbing trail. And again, that's quite tactile for people. And the kids can get a badge if they fill in the trail. And we sell that trail in the shop. Just last weekend, we used the nature trail again when the invertebrate came in to survey what bugs and insects we have out there. And we involved the public in that. So children were able to learn how to catch the bugs. They brought them back to our schoolroom, looked under the microscope, see what we've got, and then record the numbers for all types of insects we had. Next slide. And as you go along the trail, there's these different signs, not too much information all at once, just little bits of bite-sized information that people can take in and just learn about the area. Next slide. And we have our mindful signs as well, just reminding people just to take time to appreciate nature, to stop and listen. And we know that that's really good for people's mental health. And we have a tower there that once upon a time you used to see to the hills, but now because the willow has grown up, you're just at the top of the trees. But my education manager, Liz, still uses it to get children to imagine they're at the top of a rainforest canopy. The other thing we have is we don't forget our older visitors as well. We have the Tradalure trail. Now, Tradalure is a Manx phrase, and it translates as time enough. It's kind of like a manana phrase. It's a very island kind of thing. It's time enough. If somebody says Tradalure, it makes it and that's really for, I guess, the people who can't walk long distances. So we have lots of benches around the park. On the nature trail, we can see Kim there from our supporters charity that helps us to get the bid together to reinterpret this. And that's a sound bench. And again, it's powered by solar power. There's no electricity out there. And she's listening to the various different snippets of information about the wetlands. So that's, again, another good thing for visually impaired. And around the whole park, we have these paddles so that visitors can just walk a bit, sit and read information about the animals. And we've actually moved that on a bit. Next slide, please. We're now going to reinterpret the Tradalure Trail. And currently, my education manager, who does all the interpretation as well as teach all the kids and manage all the volunteers, is doing these signs. We have about 15 of them. And each sign is about biodiversity and wetlands. And it's asking you to do something. Each paddle has an ask, if you like. Now, if anybody takes a picture of that QR code, there's nothing there yet, but there will be. What it will do is take people to a website where they will be asked how many paddles they've read and which of the paddles, what action are they going to take. So we can actually record that data and have it to show how we're getting people to commit to helping wildlife and helping wetlands. And I think, is that next slide? Yeah, that's me done my bit. So I think we're going to hear Allison next.
Over to you, Allison.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Allison. I'm the Managing Director of Manx Birdlife, and I'm going to give you a quick talk about taken a very industrial site and created from that a thriving wetland. So I'm going to talk to you about the Manx Birdlife Point of Ayre National Reserve, which just rolls off the tongue, really, doesn't it? And that's situated right at the top of the Isle of Man. It's actually closer to Scotland than it is to Douglas, which is the capital of the island. Next slide, please, David. There we go. So yeah, in that top picture, you can see you can actually see Scotland in the background, which makes me feel a bit more at home. So the reserve is 105 acres. It's a mixed habitat. We've got some scrub, some heathland, but the main feature that dominates really is this large freshwater lagoon that you can see in these images. And that's an incredibly important habitat on the island. These large bodies of freshwater are relatively rare on the Isle of Man. And just being right at the top of the island, it makes it more important because the island, along with the UK and the rest of Northern Europe, sits on the East Atlantic Flyway. So about 90 million migratory birds each year going north and south. And this is the first body of water that they'll hit as they come south and the last as they go north. So it's very, very important for them. And while this all looks really lovely and picturesque, it has not always looked that way. Next slide, please. So the Point of Ayre in that whole area has got a huge industrial history. There's been sand and gravel quarrying going on since I think the 1950s, and that's really helped to mould the landscape. The extraction of millions of tons of sand and gravel over the years is what has created those large water bodies. I should also say part of the site is also an old waste tip. Which also comes with challenges because we don't actually know what's in some of them. We know some of it, but there's all sorts of things in there. So when I say that this was a truly industrial landscape, I really do mean it. Next slide, please. And that means in 2019, when Manx Birdlife signed the lease with our landlords, Island Aggregates, we really did inherit an incredibly bleak moonscape. But not just that, a moonscape that had huge chunks of concrete, old machinery that was just abandoned, the old weighbridge and things like that, huge holes with water in it that weren't fenced and very steep. It was basically just a huge health and safety nightmare, but also not particularly inspiring. I mean, if you look at this picture, it's really indicative of what it looked like. Next slide. So in 2020, we appointed our reserves manager, and he very quickly got to work trying to rectify this. So the first thing he did was get rid of all that concrete, get rid of those massive bits of metal that had been left lying about, and start to sculpt the landscape for nature. And taking an old mineral quarry and turning it into nature it's not a particularly novel idea. It's been done across the world for many years. But what is really consistent with them is you can always tell where the quarrying started. You can tell which was the first pool to be dug because they're very straight, very deep, and just very bland. So, and that's what we had. So a lot of work needed to be done to sort of introduce some vegetation, to start re-wiggling some of those straight edges, putting in a little bit of diversity and a little bit of, just variation in water depths and things like that. And that's what we've been doing over the last couple of years. Next slide, please. And I should just say, we're not doing this alone. This is very much a partnership project. Although, interesting, if you look at that slide, we've all changed, all of these organisations have changed our logos because this has been a very, very long running project. So we work with Island Aggregates, who are the landowners, and we have a 49-year lease with them for the land. But involved in that is also, we've got Isle of Man government. As has been mentioned, we are a UNESCO biosphere, and we also work very closely with the RSPB, who offer quite a lot of ecological advice because we are a very small charity. There's only 5 members of staff, so being able to bring in that expertise when required is really useful. Next slide, please. And the vision for the site, let's see, this has been a very long time in the making. It was initially thought of back in the early 2000s when the survey work for the Manx Bird Atlas was going on, and a man called Chris Sharp was wandering around thinking, this would make a really good nature reserve. And then it took us, let's say, nearly 20 years to sign that lease. So we had a lot of time to think and plan and think about what we wanted to create. And it really is just this really high quality, excellent site for nature, but also for people. Next slide. And that's pretty much what we have started to create. So we are finding that we have species, creating somewhere safe and secure for a lot of our native species. So Gadwall here being a really good example of that. It's the only place on the Isle of Man that they regularly breed. We've also had teal breeding. And then just this week, we've had reports of shoveler chicks, which is really cute and wonderful. And that's the first time we've had them. So we're really seeing a lot of these native birds making use of the site. Next slide. And as you can see from this, the percentage of the red and amber species that use the site is really high. We've actually recorded over 200 bird species on the reserve, and there's about 332, I think it is, on the Manx list. That does include the great auk, which we definitely never had reported. So to have over 2/3, or nearly 2/3 of all bird species reported on the island used in the reserve at some point is a real win. Next slide, please. We also want to try and bring back some of those species that are either lost or on the brink of being lost. Common gull here. In the early 2000s, there were only 4 or 5 nests across the whole of the island of common gulls. Last year alone on the reserve, we had 11. And then in the wider area on the Ayers National Nature Reserve, which is immediately adjacent to the reserve, they had some pairs as well. And this is a really good example of not everything has to be big and expensive and time consuming. All we've done for these birds is old fence posts and an old pallet cup to create these nest boxes, which they've taken to really readily. And it just helps to protect them from the ground predators, so mainly hedgehogs and feral cats. We want to try and attract in new bird species. So at the point of Ayr, close to the reserve, there's a really big population of Arctic and little terns. But common tern is a species that hasn't bred on the island in over 50 years. So one of the first things that we did was put out these tern rafts, which we all know that terns take to really readily. And in the first year, these went out 4 years ago. And in the first year, it's going too fast. Yeah, in the first year, we put these out. We have these 3D printed decoys on there, and we had a common tern come in, and he was, bringing in fish, displaying to the decoys. Unfortunately, they didn't reciprocate, and then he went off. Next year, he came in, did exactly the same, but we're very pleased. So next slide, please, to say that after 3 years, he did finally bring in a friend, and they did attempt to nest. They got to the egg stage, but unfortunately they were predated. But that is the first breeding attempt of common tern in about 50 years. You can probably see on this picture in that raft there is also gulls using the rafts, and we think that's what predated them. So we are trying out different designs of tern rafts to see if we can sort of dissuade the gulls, send them somewhere else, and have that available. And that is stuff that's been very generously funded by the Curraghs Wildlife Park Conservation Fund. So we're very, very grateful for that. Next slide, please. The site is also a haven for wintering birds. The majority of those 200 species that we have recorded are wintering birds. So it's a really good place to see hooper swan, a lot of duck species. And this is just a picture of our resident mute swans who split the time between us and Ramsey, which is the nearest biggest town on the island. And that's all they've done for the last 10 years. So it's creating that habitat for them. Next slide. And as I said, it is an incredibly important site for migratory and passage birds. This avocet, which I think was the 4th for the island, turned up in 2023. 2003, and it was actually our 200th bird species, which felt quite special because of, Avocets being the poster boy for a lot of avian conservation. Next slide. But it's not just about birds. We are Manx Birdlife, but these things aren't in isolation. So we also have a fantastic suite of different plants. Obviously, the very picturesque and photogenic orchids, the bee orchid in particular. We have fantastic array of them. But there's also a lot of other things, such as the not so photogenic cavernous crystalwort, which is an aquatic plant. And there's one whose name escapes me that actually has been discovered on the reserve that was thought to be extinct on the island. So we're hopefully bringing things like that back. Next slide, please. And all the other things as well. We have really good populations of dragonflies, including sort of first, second and third records for the island. And the heath bee fly is an invertebrate that in the British Isles is only found in Dorset and at the Point of Ayre. So we're lucky to have that. Next slide, please. But there's kind of no point doing all of this if we don't bring people along with us. So we do also do a lot of work for people. We have a hide on site with lots of interpretation for people. We have 4 different viewpoints, various trails that people can walk. And just this week, we've actually launched our outdoor education programme, complete with an outdoor classroom, so that we can bring the next generation along with us. So that's all really exciting. Next slide. But that's what we've done. And we are, as much as it's been 20 years in the making, we're still very much just getting started. So the blue section on this map is the current extent of the reserve. As I said, that's 105 acres. The red is the current active quarry that island aggregates are working in. Green is the area that they've literally just submitted a planning application to move into and start excavating there. And then the sort of orange yellow colour is the bit that they'll get to after that. And the plan with each of these is, as they become exhausted and island aggregates move out, they will then become part of the reserve, and we'll sign that lease with them for those as well. We, at the moment, are hoping to get that next red section in the next 12 to 18 months. It just very much depends. So that's another 120 acres that will be added to the reserve. And then over the next 20, 30 years, other areas will be added. So as much as that figure says 450 acres, there's other areas not included in that island aggregates own that we're hopefully going to take management of. We're in talks with DOI to take on some more old waste tips that can't be used for anything else. So they'll become part of the reserve. And in total, over the next, say, 20, 30 years, probably beyond, I'll have retired by the time this all happens. We're possibly looking at over 600 acres of land that will be set aside for nature. Next slide, please. And this is what is hopefully going to come to us. And one of the great things that we currently have is we have a really good working relationship with Island Aggregates as our landlord. And we are able to now go in and talk to them and advise them on how this site should be restored as they finish quarrying. And what that means is that we won't be inheriting that landscape, that, the health and safety nightmare, which is not particularly good for nature. They're listening to us and they are helping us to restore it before it even comes to us. And the way that it's going to work, when we take on this 120 acres, there will be areas that we can't open to the public for health and safety reasons because they still need access. So there will be areas that are set aside just for nature, totally undisturbed, to let nature flourish. Next slide, which I think is my last one. So as the sign says, this is a work in progress. It's been a very, very long term. I first visited the site in 2012 before I even started to work for Manx Birdlife. And I remember walking around and thinking, this is brilliant, so much potential. But oh my God, there's a lot of work to be done here. And then pretty much 10 years later, I came in and we're just getting going. There's so much potential still to be realised. There is an awful lot of work still to be done, but we really believe that what we are producing is a fantastic, thriving wetland for both nature and for people. Thank you. I'll pass over to David now.
Thank you very much, Allison. So as you heard, my name is David Bellamy and I work as Head of Conservation at Manx Wildlife Trust. From Kathleen, we've heard today about an internationally important wetland. It's been managed for nature and engagement for a very long period of time. From Allison, of course, we've just heard about a site that is becoming rapidly in importance, but collectively become of a real significance in our landscape. And on the Isle of Man, we call farm ponds dubs in Manx Gaelic. And you'll hear about a project we're just in the process of launching, supported by the Curraghs Wildlife Park Conservation Fund, which is our Ghost Dubs project. So before we talk about ghost dubs, what is a dub? So a dub is effectively a farm pond. You can see in the background a relatively large one for the Isle of Man, at least. But they come from all sorts of shapes and sizes, from being a wet field corner to something, as you can see there. And in terms of where they come from, the larger ones, like the one in the image there, are generally of glacial origins, as in kettle holes and similar features. But a lot of them are actually human-made. And that might be where we've been digging marl, which is a type of fertilizer, and where we've been digging clay, digging gravel, digging peat. And they were very, very significant in historic times because they were a very important source of water for agriculture in summer. As say, each one is not overly significant for wildlife, but collectively they are very important. About a third of the Isle of Man is very flat. The northern plain is all glacial till, and it's dotted in hundreds of these wetland features. In terms of the challenges that they face, in some cases they've been destroyed in recent times to increase farmed area. And also subsidies kind of encourage people to do this, because on the Isle of Man you still get agricultural subsidies based on the farmable area that you have. And equally, many have lost their maintenance. They used to be maintained because any willows growing around the edge, as you can see in the photo, would be a suitable use for firewood. They were important, as I mentioned, for stock water. But these days, farmers tend to fence them off because they're worried about fluke in particular, and other waterborne pathogens and parasites. But also with mains water, there just isn't that need to have on-farm supplies of water. So in many ways to farmers, they're problematic. So they've been fenced off, abandoned, and their natural succession very quickly takes place, as we saw with the Bellamy Curragh, and turning these areas from open water really within one human generation into willow carr wet woodland. And of course, with all wetlands, they have issues with runoff, as we'll see. So the one you could just see in the background is called the Bishop's Dub, quite a historic one. You can see it on satellite photo here. So you can see it's got relatively intense agriculture all the way around that pond. So clearly runoff is always going to be an issue. Another photo of the same dub, and I've put this in to show how important sheep grazing is in this, especially winter grazing by sheep, in keeping willows in control and maintaining open water. For anyone who's not from this part of the world, there's a Eurasian teal, which is red listed on the Isle of Man, and a Schedule 1 specially protected bird, the sort of thing that we'll see there in winter. And just to highlight here, you can see some mallard in the foreground with a browsing sheep. They're really kind of damaging the willows, which is great for maintaining open water. Another great ornithological highlight of the Northern Isle of Man is Glasgow Dub, a lovely photo of it here. And it looks very, very natural in this photo. Again, you can see from the sky, very intensive agriculture, a dairy farm very close, and this one really does struggle with runoff. You can see that in the tint of the water, but nevertheless, it's important for birds. And I'm just going to toggle between these two maps so you can see this is the current satellite image and a historic map from 1869, and you can clearly see this very natural looking pond is actually man-made as a marl pit. So marl was a form of agricultural fertilizer before artificial fertilizer was available. But here you can see a complex mix of habitats, but clearly a former marl pit which is now turned into marsh, which is the kind of swampy vegetation depicted there, and then an active marl pit still in use in 1869. Here's a photo I took last winter of Glasgow Dub of Eurasian widgeon there in large numbers. So this is our best, other than Allison's Reserve in the north, this is now the second best site for widgeon on the Isle of Man. So that's two examples of important dubs on the island. But now a bit of a sad story. We're going to talk about ghost dubs. So these are ones that have disappeared. And the current focus of this project was to look at ones that were lost a long time ago. But we're starting to realise that this is a problem that is still being faced today. So this is a dub in the north of the Isle of Man. This photo was taken in 2006. And if you look closely, of course, you can see it's in the process of being filled in with probably with topsoil. This photo is 2012, when you can see largely that work has been complete and there is certainly no open water remaining. And then in 2018, the field has been ploughed and you can only just see the remnants of a wetland. So we often think this is something that generations before us did, but this is happening to this very day. And certainly on the Isle of Man, we're struggling with protecting sites in law because of lack of resource and also lack of political will. And this is just to go back the same area back in 1869, and you can actually see there are 4 different wetlands that used to be part of that site. And of course, now none of those remain today. So for the next couple of examples, I'm going to have the historic 1869 map on the left and a 2018 satellite photo on the right. So when we start to look here, you can see the area described as a mole pit still exists today, but it's no longer open water. That has now become willow carr woodland. So while it's not a traditional wetland, it will still have great ecological interest. But you can also see south of there was a pond on the old 1869 map. No traces of that. And also another mole pit in the centre of the map has also disappeared. Our second example, on the left-hand side of the map, there are 4 different wetland features there. And on the right-hand side of the modern image, all of those cease to exist and have all been drained and ploughed up. And of course, there's a drain shown in the centre of the image. Our third example, again on the left, you can see 2 actual open water areas and an area of rough grazing or marsh or seasonally inundated wetland, and again that would have been in the center of the arable field where there's a little circle. So sometimes it's difficult to correspond to these, but often the only remnants of these is either in a very, very wet winter, water will still pool in where the areas where the water used to be. Equally, also in a very, very dry summer in drought conditions, you tend to get scorch marks on the ground, highlighting where the wetlands used to be. And the final example here, a really complex one, you can see on the left-hand image in 1869 at Rendu, a really complex series of open water, wet grassland, marshy floating vegetation, and an active marl pit. So presumably all of those wetlands probably were human in origin at some way, shape and form. And a bit like Allison just mentioned, sequencing for the creation of her site, I think we've got sequencing in the creation of a wetland here. But then on the image on the right, of course, all of that has now been drained, improved for agriculture, and in some cases built on. So, of course, with these stories, a little bit depressing there, but we are where we are. That's the future the real history that the Isle of Man has had. So I will now very briefly talk about the future. So this is Ballacrossan in the centre of the Isle of Man. On the left-hand image in 2006, you can see there's a field, an odd-shaped field there. That's just, I believe, had its hay cut. And this is on a floodplain. The river is to the north of the photo, and all of the channels here have been straightened. This floodplain has been disconnected from the river with levees. And the sites are now into productive agriculture, where wetlands once would have thrived. And on the right-hand side, you can see this is our first real test project working with a local farmer. You can see a whole series. There's now to today 15 different water bodies have been recreated in that area. Flood levees have been removed, and we're in the process now of restoring the river to natural channels. And last winter, it was quite exciting to see the whole floodplain actually acting as a floodplain, holding water in spate conditions and stopping the town downstream where we are right now from flooding. So in terms of the Ghost Dubs project, we're looking to emulate this and look at all these historic maps and use other historical features to identify where we've lost wetlands. Later this year, we'll be mapping those and publishing that online in an interactive format, so that farmers and land managers can understand if they have lost a wetland at any point in the future, because sometimes this is over a century ago. So we're really wanting to highlight first the loss of wetlands here on the Isle of Man, and then look at restoring them into the future. And that's all I've got to say. So we're going to be available, all three of us, Allison, Kathleen, and myself, should anyone have any questions.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. My real great thanks to all of you for such fascinating, rich presentations about all of the fabulous work you're doing and its impact as well. I'd like to kick off some questions. I just have a particular question, I suppose, perhaps aimed at Kathleen and Allison. I'd like to ask about visitors to your sites. To my shame, I don't know the population of the Isle of Man, but I was just wondering how important the tourist trade is, tourist numbers, to your visitor numbers, to your attractions. You know, whether that's birders coming over, or indeed visitors for the nature trail.
Yeah, I'll go first if that's okay. And Tina, it's around 50,000. Sometimes it's below that, sometimes it's above that. We're actually about 80% local, so we're really important to the locals, particularly schools and multi-generational families. I think the Isle of Man has some fantastic landscape, but not all of it is accessible. So if you're a family and you've got Granny with you and you've got kids and kids, somewhere like the wildlife park is really accessible, and it's got toilet facilities, cafe, play areas as well. So our penetration, I guess, is really good because our population is 85,000. So to have a football, sometimes as much as 60,000, means that we're well used. We have members as well, so there's a membership scheme, so families can pay for an annual pass. So we have around 4,000 members, so that's quite a lot for considering the population size. One of the good things that we are able to do, being, I suppose, attraction that attracts people, is when they come in, we have a voluntary donation of £1 on the gate fee, but it's opt-out, which means they have to walk up and state that they don't want to pay the donation. And that £1 goes into our conservation fund. So Allison mentioned the opening of their education facility, and in fact our conservation fund paid for a composting toilet up there, which she was really excited about, and I was really excited to see it. So we, I guess, can be the window for areas as well on the island. And yeah, so we can attract people where there's a lot of really highly engaged people, and they'll be members of Manx Wildlife Trust. There is maybe some families that wouldn't necessarily sign up to Manx Wildlife Trust, but when they visit us, even if they're visiting mostly for the play areas and a day in, we're able to get £1 off each of them and help with that conservation. So our conservation fund, we do often work with Manx Wildlife Trust and Manx Birdlife, but also, of course, because we've got exotic species, we'll help with things like red pandas, or recently, not so long ago, we gave donation to the Pantanal project, the tapir project. So we're educating people about wildlife worldwide and habitats worldwide. But we also recognise that we have to be people take care of what's on our doorstep. I'll let Allison explain about her site.
Yeah, I mean, we at the Point of Ayre we get probably we think sort of 5,000 to 10,000 visitors a year. The reserve has only been open to the public for just under 2 years now, and we haven't massively publicised it. We're trying to let people find it quite naturally, and it is majority of people are it's birders and just general nature lovers. But with the education that we're now doing, we're hoping more kids and we'll get more families. But yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of ecotourism, it would be brilliant if we could do more of that on the island, because we do have some amazing things that we could share with people. So yeah, I think that'd be great to develop that.
Great, thank you very much. We do have a couple of written questions, which I will ask you. So the first one is, do you have any challenges with invasive species on the island?
Maybe it's the time to mention the wallabies. Yeah, so the Isle of Man does have quite a large population of wallabies. You can guess where they'd most likely come from, the wildlife park. I have been at the wildlife park now for 14 years. I can assure you the wallabies escaped long before it started. The first recorded escape of a wallaby was just after the park opened in 1965. And there's unrecorded verbal reports of strafing in the 1980s. So there is a sizable population of wallabies. Divisive issue because some people love to go wallaby spotting, and there is some evidence maybe they're helping fill a niche that we don't have here on the island. We don't have any predators either, like foxes, that might actually take wallabies out in the UK. So that's part of the reason why they've done so well. But then there is health issues with that if they've not got a predator to manage them. So there has been talk about what do we do with the wallabies. But some people, obviously, it's an invasive species, will say they shouldn't be there. Other people will say, leave them alone, we like the wallabies. So, there is a sizable wallaby population.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, the next one's aimed at David. In terms of your dub ponds, have you had any challenges when working with farmers and land managers? I mean, you talked quite a lot about the fact that a lot of these ponds dubs have been filled in because of the need for agriculture. What sort of reaction, I suppose, are you getting from the farmers and land managers to the project to bring them back?
So certainly what we're finding today is farmers are very much open-minded on the Isle of Man. They see that the world is changing, that the direction of agriculture is changing, and that it needs to be more sustainable. One of the ways we're struggling is government policy locally keeps flip-flopping. And so farmers are worried that if they take an area out of active agriculture, they might receive a couple of years of support to do so, and thereafter the government may change its mind. So farmers have got a very long-term mindset, far longer than a 5-year parliamentary cycle. And certainly getting our subsidies changed is quite difficult. So we have an agri-environment scheme at the minute, which will pay the full cost for a farmer to restore a wetland on their farm, but it will only pay 100% of costs. So they don't actually earn anything from it. And then the following year, they're effectively out of pocket because, yes, they might not be paying anymore, but they'll lose the subsidies on that land. And there's a lot of inertia in the system in changing these. So I guess to answer your question more directly, farmers are very, very much open-minded. It's system change and government policy that takes a lot longer and is far more complicated.
Thank you. And I'm going to use this opportunity to bring in Seungbo, who is dialed in very late at night from Korea. And she said that they're similar to the dubs in Korea, and she was surprised to see similar ones in the UK. And I also know that WWT has worked on some disappearing ponds, and in fact in Cambodia I happen to know that there is a conservation society that is looking at effectively the disappeared. I think they call them the cattle ponds, but it's effectively exactly the same thing. But Seungbo says the Korean call them Dungbun. I don't know whether I've said that right, Seungbo, but anyway, but they're very similar to dubs. So there you go. You've got another term for the ponds. And please do come in, Seungbo, if you want to do that. In the meantime, there's another question, I think this time for Allison. Allison, you mentioned your outdoor classroom, which is quite new. Can you say any more about what sort of, either what work have you done already with schools or what have you got planned?
So we've had an education program for the last, let me do the maths on this, 5 or 6 years, predominantly going into primary schools. But now with the reserve, we actually, Manx Birdlife have 2 nature reserves on the island, one at the top, which is the point of air, but then we also have one right at the bottom as well. Not planned at all. We're now developing getting kids out, but we very much see the point of air reserve as a resource for that. It's somewhere kids can go. It's safe. They can run about. We've just put in this. It's a canopy. It's a big umbrella, but it means, you know, adverse weather and things like that, it can be folded down, and we have to make sure everything is as weatherproof as possible up there. So we've got 2 members of education staff within the team, and that is their job, to go out and talk to kids and get them involved. And honestly, they do a brilliant job. But I mean, Wildlife Trust and the Wildlife Park also have, you know, good education staff, and they all work together, which is brilliant, because we're all trying to do the same thing, which is just get that next generation to take over from us, really.
Great, thank you very much. I think Marie is trying to get Seongbo in so that she can correct my bad pronunciation, but I don't know if they're successful on that yet. So just 1 minute, we'll see if Seongbo can come in.
I think you are successful. Tina, your Korean pronunciation was very correct. So we're done with Korean. So,
Go on, you say it. You say it though.
Tumbong.
Okay.
Yeah. So I am very surprised. Oh, first of all, thank you for the presentation. It's very enlightening moment for me to learn. And really, I was very surprised with David's presentation. And so I think I missed the first part, David. So duck, my pronunciation is correct. Duck is kind of direct in the UK, or is it the existing word?
Sorry, could you just repeat the final part of the question there?
So the dog is existing word in the English dictionary, or is
I
it
see.
direct in the UK?
Yes, so it's not an English word, so you wouldn't find it in an English dictionary. It's very much local to the Isle of Man. It's one of those Manx Gaelic words that when most people had stopped speaking Manx Gaelic, it lived on in what we would call the Manx English dialect, as many place names did. So there'll often be people who can speak no Manx at all, but they use Manx terms without realising it. And dub is one of the very best examples of that.
And the Korean word tumbang is also similar. It's not the it's a kind of dialect in that you can heard in the local area, but not in the capital city. So it's very impressive.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seongbo. I'm wondering, so are people trying to save them or bring them back into usage in the Korean, as David was explaining?
Yeah, actually, so the tumbang is also located. You can easily find can be found in the agriculture area, but farmers are used to fill it as they are already receiving the agricultural water from the reservoir as the technology is advanced. So, but the county level, they try to protect it and conserve it. And as a national level, the agricultural ministry designates some area as a national importance of agricultural heritage. So some are protected already.
Interesting.
Mm.
You know, if I may come back a little, one of the problems we face on the Isle of Man is there's several hundred dubs across the island, complicated by many of them are now wet woodland. And to designate each one, we would have to visit each one, do a lot of study, get landowner permission, very complicated. But
Yes.
a roundabout way that we've come up with it is we've made a very, very common species on the Isle of Man, a protected species, and that's the common frog, Rana temporaria.
Yeah.
And by making a very common species a protected species, which and bluntly that species doesn't really deserve to be protected in isolation. Well, what it's meant is, in the way our system works, but it's meant all of these wetlands now have a level of accidental or default protection because they may house a protected species. So very recently, you know, they've all got this interim level of protection. You can't do anything with them now until someone's been to look for frogs. So it's a funny way of getting around lack of resource and political will by the back door, almost.
Wow, that's really impressive. It just shows how conservationists generally and wetland conservationists in particular are hugely resourceful, as we all know, in every which way. I'm conscious of the time. I think we've exhausted the questions. I'd like to say a huge thank you again to all three of you for introducing us to, a part of a near neighbour, shall I say, of of me. I won't say a part of the United Kingdom that I didn't know very much about, and it certainly, piqued my interest to try to get over to the Isle of Man sometime. But thank you. It was really, really very, very interesting. And we will put this on the Welly YouTube channel so that other people can watch it too. And yeah, we will be flying the flag for the Isle of Man. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.